spiritual food for thought. Welcome back to Spiritual Food for Thought. I thank you for joining me once again. The last video was pretty fun in the comment section, and it caused quite a stir. And what happened is, at some point, the YouTube algorithm, which likes interactions, it likes people taking the time to leave a thumbs up or a thumbs down and make a comment. The video is making an impression, right? It realized that if it recommended my last video to certain people, now I would generally classify them as, God haters or humanists or atheists, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But when it would recommend them to those people, they would either get triggered or offended or angry or have some sort of a reaction that would cause them to dislike the video and leave a comment. So what we're going to be able to do now is to sort through some of these comments. And what happened is, these people who by and large seem to hate the God of the Bible, who by and large seem to be fans of humanism, left some comments that really just completely prove my point. Now, the purpose of the last video was me telling people, you know what, stick to the Bible, don't try to mix humanism with the Bible. And I warned people against that. These comments were pretty telling. They're pretty interesting. There's 3 that I really want to share with you guys. And I will say, too, that on average, Spiritual Food for Thought, this channel, often 100% likes when people watch the video. They know what they're getting. It's Spiritual Food for Thought. It's you like God, you like the Bible, you like Jesus, you want to be encouraged in that direction. So it's often, most of the time, above 90, frequently 100% likes. This last one, only about 1/3 were likes. The other 2/3 were people saying, I do not like that video. Now, people who took the time to comment, I'm not sure if it's the same ones who gave that dislike, have names that they chose for their username on YouTube, like an atheist named Jesus. That's why I don't mind saying people who hate God. Okay? Fallen One. Zerubbabel, which is a highly spiritual name, if you think about it, for somebody who doesn't like God, but it really means seed of Babylon. Atheist comments. That was another one who left. So to say that some of these people are atheists, yes, atheist comments is, how they prefer to present themselves in the public sphere as they interact with strangers on YouTube. Kind of like Fallen One and Zerubbabel and an atheist named Jesus. And we also had some comments from Slutty Frog Magician. Okay, that's how this person chooses to present themselves. On this channel, I call it Spiritual Food for Thought because that's my goal and my focus. I want you to think about these people who got offended that I said, stay away from humanism. It's going to corrupt your faith. And then they have names like this. So I hope you can see just from the get-go, before we even look to what they said, why I said what I said. When I warned people to stay away from humanism, stick to what God says in Scripture. So these comments, they really wound up proving my point. And there's 3 special ones which I really want to share with you guys. One's incredibly telling. One is just spot on. Another one is amazing. It really gives us some good stuff to think about as we continue to have spiritual food for thought. So when I said that humanism was dangerous and not to try to mix it with a biblical faith, let's see what the humanists said in response. So let's take a look at some of these comments, and I'm guessing that these people would all identify themselves as humanists. That's why they left these comments. But also, a number of them hate God. For sure, 100%. So maybe don't believe what they believe while you try to love God. Just going to throw that out there. This one says, dude, you seem like you want to be a good person, but you've got it all wrong. You have an imaginary friend. He's not actually there. On top of that, you think that all the bad stuff you and other people do is forgiven because your imaginary friend supposedly died in a rough way. Other people have been through much worse than Jesus, and that somehow makes it okay. That's not how it works. Now, the comment continues, but that's a taste of it. Okay? Don't believe what this person believes while you try to love God, love Jesus, try to obey God. Stay away from that. This one, in interaction with some other people, said that Yahweh is the adversary for giving excessive liberty to two individuals to determine the eternal fate of all their descendants. Okay, they say that Yahweh is the adversary because he gave people free will. And of course, if he didn't, then he'd be our enemy anyway. You know, it's a lose-lose situation, because no matter what, this person's going to attempt to condemn God to justify themselves. Of course, you get comments like, you should get out more. And this one here, Yahweh is a desert, storm, or war god, interested in land, sheep, and goat counts. Isn't it obvious how man-made he is? No, it's not. Here we go. Maybe the problem is your God is not good. Maybe the reason you shouldn't mix humanism with what the Bible says is God's bad. I understand why people say this. You know why people say this? Because they don't want God to be real. Why not? Because they know that they've sinned. And they don't want to be held accountable for that sin. So it's easier for them to pretend people are good on their own, to pretend that nobody's going to hold them accountable for their sin, and to pretend that God's not there, so therefore they can do as they wish and nothing matters. That's preferable than facing the facts for them. So they have an invested interest to pretend God's not there. This next one from Atheist Comments: you guys need to stop this make-believe with imaginary characters. Okay? Need to stop the make-believe with imaginary characters. Don't believe in God. Don't believe in Jesus. Don't do any of that. Just do as thou wilt. Another comment was, a person without God can never be all that he or she could be. It is sad that religious indoctrination makes people think that this is the case. That, oh, you'll never be all you can be without God. I'm not trying to even be all that I can be. I'm just trying to be who he wants me to be. So should everyone. In interaction with some others, the same person said, by moral lawgiver, do you mean the invisible, magical being from Jewish mythology? That's what they think your God is. To the believers out there. These people, these humanists, who, this guy left many comments, okay, so this got to him. Wants to fight against the idea that you shouldn't mix humanism with belief in the God of the Bible. And he thinks the God of the Bible is an invisible, magical being from Jewish mythology. I'd steer clear of what this guy believes, if that's not your view of God. Another one says, humanism is against God, but God is against humans, so I guess it's no big deal. Okay, God's against humans. God doesn't love us. God doesn't want to forgive us. God hates us. He's our enemy. He's the adversary, according to another one, right? This mythical being who doesn't even exist. He's the adversary? And the comments continue. Maybe faith could try being verifiable and grounded in objective, measurable reality. Just a thought. Otherwise, it's literally just wishful thinking. Secular society is there so you can have the freedom to be in your la-la land religion. Okay? They believe biblical faith is la-la land religion. Which one is more likely to justify slavery, imperialism, or colonialism? You do the math. And I've got some other ones I want to share before I hit these top three. But I think you guys can see the humanist view on our faith. Which is why I encourage people so strongly, don't bother with that. Stick to what God says. Dismiss this. It's going to corrupt your faith. It's not going to be good. This one says, I'll listen to God when he talks to me. He can do that, right? Being all powerful. He should just be able to do this without messing with my free will. If he really wants to, that is. Or if he actually exists. Hope that person's not serious, because there's plenty of people who begin to hear voices in their head, attribute it to God, and do all sorts of stuff. But this is the burden of proof that this person wants to throw out. When he talks to me, then I'll believe. And this is a sad one. In hell there may be pain as in life, but what is pain of the flesh compared to freedom of the soul? At least in hell I will know in my heart, never bent the knee to some God who commanded genocide, mass murder of innocent infant boy children, child trafficking, and slavery. That's their view of your God. This one says faith is the toxic philosophy. This one says it's much less toxic to believe in an ancient mythology of blood sacrifice and substitutionary atonement. Utter silliness. So rather than believe in secular humanism, it's less toxic, they say, to believe in ancient mythology, blood sacrifice, substitutionary atonement. See that? Substitutionary atonement. You know they've been exposed to some of the truth. So what do? They mock it. Here's one you may not enjoy. Cults often have to shut out any outside information in order not to feel threatened. You're shutting yourself off because you're scared to admit that you're wrong about Christianity being the one true religion, when literally no religion is true. No one can demonstrate the existence of a God to each other, let alone which God it is, or that they can communicate with it accurately. You're in a cult, bro. Just wake up. That's the view of some of these people. I could go across a whole bunch of that, tear that apart line by line. I'm not going to here. I want to share some of these other ones with you, but I'm trying to build the foundation of when I say don't mix humanism with your biblical faith, it's going to be bad for your faith. And these people show up, and a lot of God haters who mock and ridicule and make fun of your God are the humanists. And they're saying, no, humanism's good. Faith is bad. Do you see why I'd say don't mix these two? Yeah. Using your brain in general has a tendency of corrupting your faith. And then they put the little sad emoji face there, right? Using your brain in general has a tendency of corrupting your faith. I'd say not so. But let's get on to these major three that I wanted to share with you. The first one proves my point so perfectly. Okay, my point was do not mix humanism with your biblical faith. And I even said something in that video. Humanism itself has grown to the point where I believe it's pretty much just all secular. And to try to merge or marry the two is detrimental to our faith. Yeah, I said if one of them is going to give, it's not going to be the humanism that you subscribe to. It's going to be your biblical faith. So this person says, if the Bible was so great, you wouldn't need to incorporate anything else into it. So by definition, you're admitting the Bible and Christianity is lacking, null and void in my eyes. Actually, I didn't encourage mixing any of it. I said stay away from it. I said just stick with God. But they're saying if you need to mix things with it, it's obviously lacking. And the person continues with, and it is good. Good without God. And I don't know how many of you guys have ever seen the Cristiano Brothers film, Time Changer. I would recommend it if you haven't watched it. But basically part of the premise was the difference with promoting good without God or good with the authority of God being the origin of that good. And I think it's worth it. I don't like many movies. Most of them are no good. They do not benefit you. They will not help your soul. Time Changer, I would say it's worth a watch. And it really proves this point. That the whole good without God idea, which humanism in general pushes very hard, is not where it's at. And actions have consequences. If you remove God from the picture, then it becomes, yeah, says who? If there's no authority, then everything becomes arbitrary. My morality, my reality, my belief system, my feelings, it's all just subjective. And that doesn't work. We need a foundation. If the foundations be destroyed or removed, what can the righteous do? But 100% spot on, proving my point. Right. If the Bible was so great, we wouldn't need to incorporate anything else to it. We wouldn't need to add to it. Doesn't he say don't add or take away? Yeah, multiple times. The next comment. If humanism and Christianity are incompatible, then it's time to drop the Christianity. What was that I said? Humanism itself has grown to the point where I believe it's pretty much just all secular. And to try to merge or marry the two is detrimental to our faith. Yes, it would be your faith that would suffer. If humanism and Christianity are incompatible, then it's time to drop the Christianity. Why? Because obviously humanism is the greater one. In this person's eyes. Humanism, great thing. Christianity could be okay as long as it agrees with humanism. we're going to use that as the measuring tool. No, no, no. We should start with the Word of God, what He has recorded for us, and use that as the litmus test to check other things. I would say, tested humanism, throw it out. It doesn't match. It doesn't line up. And we're going to get into why. And this last one here really is incredibly interesting to consider. And it really shows the flawed view of humanism. So this person here says, to be clear, humanism is basically the philosophical version of Jesus' second commandment in Mark 12:30-31. He puts loving your neighbor as yourself on par with loving God. So I'm not sure why any Christian would have a problem with a philosophy that values human dignity. First of all, I don't disagree with valuing human dignity, but I think that we have to start somewhere. And if we don't start somewhere, then we're just trying to be good without God, which will never measure up because we will have sin. God provides the solution for sin. Even if we stop sinning, we still have prior sins to which He's going to hold us accountable to as the judge. So here, when this person says, to be clear, humanism is basically the philosophical version of Jesus' second commandment, we're going to look at the text from both there, and then also I think Matthew 22. But here he appeals to Mark 12:30-31. He says, He, being Jesus, puts loving your neighbor as yourself on par with loving God. And I will say, no, He doesn't. Absolutely not. No, He doesn't. And that's my point. It is not on par with loving God. There is the first and greatest commandment, which is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it or similar because it's a love-based commandment, but it's second. That means it's inferior. It does not take the preeminence. They're not co-equal. God comes first, and that's the whole purpose why I would reject humanism or any attempted blend of it with my faith, and especially secular humanism, as these God haters have embraced. So my response to that person was, Jesus does not put loving your neighbor as yourself on par with loving God. He puts it second, beneath, after. That's why loving God is the first commandment. Once we love God enough to believe and obey Him, then we can truly love our neighbors appropriately. I hope that makes sense. And we're going to look at Matthew 22 to see why I said what I said there. But the one that they appealed to comes from Mark 12, so let's look at that. Mark 12, starting in verse 28. And one of the scribes came, having heard them reasoning together, and perceiving that he had answered them well, asked him, which is the first commandment of all? And Jesus answered him, the first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like, namely this, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. And the scribe said unto him, Well, master, thou hast said the truth, for there is one God, and there is none other but He, and to love Him with all the heart, and with all the understanding, and with all the soul, and with all the strength, and to love his neighbor as himself is more than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. Now, let's just pause for a moment and think. How are we supposed to love God? I have a video on it if you're unfamiliar with the concept. I'd recommend checking that out. But how are we supposed to love God? With all our heart, all our soul, all our mind, all our strength. What percent is that? That would be 100%. So if I love God, let's think as men for a moment, then we'll think more spiritually. If we think as men for a moment, and I love God with 100%, how much is left for my wife? How much is left for my children? How much is left for my family, my friends, my enemies, my strangers, my neighbors? That'd be 0%, right? But the way that God thinks isn't the way that we do. There's a way that seems right unto man, but the end thereof is the way of death. Without God, we have death. We need God's input on this, and his ways are higher than our ways. So he records some of it and brings it down to fill in that gap. Because as high as the heavens are above the earth, so are his ways and his thoughts above ours. So he tells us if we love him with 100%, then we're going to take him that serious that when he tells us how to love others, like my wife, my children, my friends, my enemies, my family, my neighbors, strangers, I'm going to take him 100% serious, and I'm going to love them in a better way than I could have come up with on my own. That's why that's the first and greatest commandment. Let's look at the one from Matthew quick as well. So in Matthew chapter 22, starting at verse 35, then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him, and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? And Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So to hang them there doesn't mean get a noose. It means to bring them under one point. So he's saying there's basically two points. Two things you can hang something on. It's loving God or loving your neighbor as yourself. And I would even say that loving your neighbor as yourself comes after loving God, if you think about it. It fits under that umbrella. But the commandments that are given in Scripture fall into a category of how we love God or how we love our neighbor as ourself. That's the two categories they fit into. All the commandments fit into those two categories. That's why I try not to love God with 75%. Try to love him with 100%. It's what we're commanded to do. All our heart, all our mind, all our soul, all our strength. And that's why I do not consider Jesus' second commandment to be on par with the first, because the first is the primary. It's the one that is greater. And the second comes after it, and those are the two categories under which all the rest of the commandments fit. But to love the Lord our God, we're never commanded to love others with all our heart, all our soul, all our mind, and all our strength. That's reserved for God. And that's first and foremost. But when we do, he teaches us how to be a better, brother or husband or father or neighbor or friend or enemy than we could be on our own. That's why he gets that position in our life. He should be first and foremost, and that's what humanism leaves out. That's what humanism rejects, and that's why there's all these people who embrace and cling to humanism and how great people are apart from God and how great we are. We can love each other and take care of each other and all these things. But they want, at least a good portion of them, to leave God out of it. And that's why they represent themselves online with names they chose for themselves, like Slutty Frog Magician, or Atheist Comments, or an atheist named Jesus, or Zerubbabel, or Fallen One. Whatever the Fallen One is telling you, reject. Whatever somebody who calls themselves an atheist named Jesus embraces as their theology, or even their philosophy, I would recommend rejecting, unless you want to be like them. I do not want to be like those people. I would like those people to be more like the God, or more like the Jesus, that they're mocking and ridiculing and condemning in an attempt to justify themselves. So it's interesting sometimes how people can just come along and completely prove your point. Absolutely. That last comment, think about that. They think these are co-equal. This is on par. No, it's like it. Because it's about not esteeming yourself more highly than others. It's about focusing on others. It's about love. But there's the second commandment and the first. Okay? They come in this order. Him first, then the rest of us. That's how that works. They're not equal. And what humanism does often is exalts man above God. Why? Well, they just said if there's one of these two is lacking, why don't you drop your faith and embrace the humanism? No. I would definitely not recommend that. I hope this makes sense. And I hope it just solidifies what I was trying to get across in my previous video. Apparently the humanists hated it. I get that. They wouldn't have hated it if they didn't hate God. And if people truly loved God, they wouldn't try to intermingle the holy with the profane. They wouldn't try to sit there and be like, well, I'm going to bring my holy biblical belief and try to mix it with this profane, secular, belief system. They wouldn't do that. Which is why I encourage them to reject it. Be blessed. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.